I have 3 different books launching between November and March, and these ones aren't even comics. I have 3 other comic series being worked on right now, with 2 more that are still in the nascent stages. So how do I juggle having all these comic projects being worked on while also working on prose in novellas and novels? Let's get into that today, and I'll show you how I make it all work. Hello and welcome to Pesto Comics. This is the entry for October 29th, 2025. Writing in seasons, how I juggle it all. Welcome back. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Adriano. I've been writing for about 20 years, but I haven't really been taking it seriously until about 3 years ago with the launch of Pesto Comics. I've been writing for a while, and I've been writing all different kinds of genres and formats, and I didn't really figure out how to make it work until I discovered this method, which is writing in seasons. It's a framework that's kept me really productive and has been working for me for quite a while, and today I want to share it with you. So before we dive into the details of what the framework is, I want to show you why it's important. You've probably heard that multitasking isn't actually a real thing. You can't actually multitask. All you're doing is switching your brain from one task to another, and in the end, you end up being a lot less productive. Well, this happens to be true with your creative projects as well. Although you may not be switching in the same way as you do when you're doing regular multitasking, answering emails and attending meetings and doing that kind of thing, switching with your creative endeavors is just as costly. Working on all that at the same time, you end up finding that you're not doing much at all. Yes, writing is writing, but writing a comic book is very different from writing a novel and very different from writing a short story. There's a cost to switching formats or genres, and you're going to have to take some time to reset and get back into that frame of mind each time you're doing something different. As someone who likes to jump genres frequently and sometimes do noir, sometimes sci-fi, I'll kind of go all over the place genre-wise, doing it with formats is even more detrimental. So there's a way to do it and still be successful. And it's not just about the writing itself, but almost everything you're doing, you begin to gear into this other persona that you develop. So over the past few months, I've been entirely focused on writing comics. I've been getting those artists working. I've been sending them scripts. And now that they're drawing and working on those projects, there's not much left for me to do as a writer. So I'm switching to author mode, and I'm getting into writing my novels and novellas. When your brain stays in one mode, your output will increase. I can vouch for this. I managed to do this weekly newsletter because a lot of it is pre-written. Although I may record and do all that stuff closer to the date that I actually release the video, I've written a lot of these newsletters well before I ever record them. And I do them in batches. This way, when I'm in newsletter mode, I know that this is what I'm writing and I'm able to stay focused in that format. I do the same with novels, and I do it again with the comics. So I do everything in batches, but it's not about doing everything in one sitting. It's also about doing things seasonally. So as I have the artists working on the scripts I've provided, then I jump into novels. Once the artists start catching up and it's time to start launching comics, then I start working on the new scripts for them to start working on. So I'm doing everything with the production timeline in mind as well. I know that I'm going to be launching campaigns throughout 2026, so I keep in mind when I'll be able to deliver scripts to artists and when I'll be able to deliver my novels to editors. When I'm focused on one way of doing things, it really does help the output. If you're having a hard time doing that, there's challenges and things you can do to kind of get you in this way of working. Novel November, formerly NaNoWriMo, is a perfect example of that. It's 30 days for you to focus on getting a novella done. 50,000 words in 30 days. If you're working on it every day, you'll have something that you can start with. I'm going to be doing it myself as well now that I'm moving into this author mode, and we'll review that in December. This guy has been an absolute terror right now, by the way. I don't know how this recording is going to turn out, and I don't know if you could hear me very well, but my goodness, Oliver's just been a real pain. Anyway, so I mentioned I'm in my author season right now, so let me tell you how I got into this phase. It all started with Big Smoke Pulp Volume 2. I'm working on getting that anthology together and edited with all the authors that have submitted stories and getting some short stories of my own together for stretch goals in that book. That's almost a soft way of getting into this season, as I'm not entirely responsible for the work and the production of the words that are going into this book, but it still gets me thinking in that framework of prose over comics. This is all while I have comic artists working on comics on the scripts that I've already provided them. I'm also going through drafts of Switch Restart to get that finalized and to an editor so it's ready to launch in January. You can find the pre-launch for that on BackerKit right now. And then, of course, there's the big launch for my new series coming out in March, starting with Backlot Babylon. The way I'm doing it on Kickstarter is I'm actually going to be launching 3 novels at once. So my goal with these novels is to get them all done and with an editor so that when I close off this author season and I get back to working on scripts for artists, I know that I have work that's waiting for me so that once the editors do get back and send me back these novels, I can switch back to an author season. So you can see how I'm always doing everything in chunks. I'm always thinking about working with this type of work, working in this mindset, working with this style, this way of writing before I switch to another. I'm not working on one thing one day and one thing the next. I'm always doing it in certain phases. And this all aligns with my production schedule. So I'm keeping in mind when these things should be ready and when I can do the Kickstarter campaigns for them based on where I am in my writing schedule. So if I'm launching something on Kickstarter, I'm very likely in the opposite season in my writing schedule. And that's just a way of keeping myself productive and having many things going at the same time while still feeling like I'm focused. So let's talk about the nitty-gritty and the framework. There's 4 steps to all of it. We start with step 1, which is the audit. You're going to look at what's in production and what needs to be written. So for me, it's very easy. With comics, once I've written the script and given it to the artist, my part is done. I'm just waiting for pages to come back. That's where the novels come into play. So for me, it's a very easy delineation. For you, you may find that maybe you're working on one novel and you have it with an editor and now you're working on the next and your season is working on this novel. It may not just be the type of work you're doing, but it may be the project you're working on. But just keep in mind what is out of your hands and what you're waiting for and what you can be actively working on today. Step 2 is to match your seasons to your production gaps. So again, as artists are doing all the drawing, they don't need anything from me. So you always want to make sure that your artists are well fed, that they always have something to be working on. If you can anticipate that they'll be done issue 1 in a certain amount of time, make sure that the script for issue 2 is ready. I say this, I'm not always the best at it. Some artists are faster than others, and I'm not always on top of who's going to be the one that's faster. So sometimes I know that I could be a bit lacking in terms of getting scripts right away. But in a perfect world, I'm anticipating that and I'm getting them scripts when they need them. And that all means aligning your seasons in time with when people will need you and when they don't. Step 3, plan your deep thinking blocks. So I say deep thinking, but really the idea is when are you going to focus on one style, one genre, one whatever of your writing? When are you going to be writing comic scripts? I personally like to do it in 2 to 3 month sections of this is when I'm working on a novel and this is when I'm working on a comic. When it comes to the newsletter, which is a totally different way of writing, I'm usually doing that on a weekly basis. So this week is my newsletter writing week. And then I take 2 to 3 weeks off before jumping back in and getting the next batch done. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that you block everything out and you don't actually work on anything different. In fact, that's a quick way for you to burn out on a certain type of project. But the idea is that as you're working on a certain type or certain style of writing, you're doing it for an extended period of time. You can work in breaks here and there to work on different things, but ideally what you're doing is working on one style of writing for one nice chunk of time. The whole idea with this is not to be rigid or static, but for you to have strategic rotation, for you to have a good sense of what's to come and what you need to focus on so that you can start preparing mentally and practically. And that's where step 4 comes in. Plan the next season before you get to it. Know what you need to start writing, what you need to start planning before you even get to that stage. While you're working on your novels, know what comics need working on before you get there. Even if it's just a loose idea, you don't have to have everything completely outlined and ready. That's actually part of the season itself. But at least know what projects are going to need doing, whether it's something new you're working on or something that you owe someone. But at least have a sense of, over this time period, this is what I'm focused on. For me, it's not just writing. I always have a campaign going. I always have something to push. While you're in some kind of season, that may just be for your writing. And everything else has their own seasons and their own schedules to keep track of. I try to keep my output as high as possible, and this is the only way I've come close to sustaining it. If you want to keep track of all of it, you can find me at Pesto Comics all over the internet, but you could also find me on YouTube where I do the long form videos. And for even more, check out the newsletter at pestocomics.substack.com, where not only do I post these videos, but I also post a secret epilogue that if you keep watching, I get into even more beyond this video. It's a little more freeform. It's a little more me sharing my secrets as I speak freely. So definitely worth checking out. And then of course there's a paid tier where I get in depth and start talking numbers and all that business behind the paywall. So, of course, wherever you're watching this, I'd love to know, what projects are you working on? What are you juggling? What genres? What formats? What styles? I'd love to know what you're trying to work on, and maybe there's some way I can help you out. I read all the comments. I reply to all of them. So please leave a comment. Let me know. I'm very curious to hear what you're working on. And of course, I'm here every Wednesday, both with the Substack newsletter and on YouTube. So be sure to check out the next video coming next week. So for those of you on YouTube, check out the Substack as we go into even more video. And for those of you on Substack, stick around. But even more importantly, if you're a paid subscriber, stick around past the epilogue as we get into some paid content. We're going to talk a little bit about the financials, how I set the campaign goals, and what I need to happen for all of this to be successful. So all of that's behind the paywall. Regardless of whether you're sticking around or not, I want to thank you for being here. We'll talk again next Wednesday. Until next time.